Greetings, old souls. It's Dr. J, and we are going into part 2 of multidimensional living, and why should we consider it? Why should we dive into it? Well, part 1 talks a lot about why we feel resistance and why it's reasonable to have some skepticism, and then we also talk about a kind of scientific precedent or parallel for the idea or the experience of multidimensional living. But what I want to talk about today are essentially the benefits. The way I think of it is something like this. If you had a problem with your car and you could go see a mechanic that understands the inner workings of the entire vehicle, from the engine and every single part of the engine to the body of the car, even maybe the wheels, system, and so on. I mean, shows you how much I know about cars. Or you could go to a mechanic that knows absolutely everything about carburetors only, nothing else. No other part of the engine, just carburetors. Well, you'd want to go to the person that knows more about the whole system. If you were to go to a restaurant and feed a whole community of people, and you could go to a restaurant that cooks all kinds of foods for all kinds of people, vegetarian and plant-based and meat and gluten-free and all these different variations. That would probably be your first choice, as opposed to a place that maybe only makes croissants really, really well. Well, I could go on with the analogies, but the point is that as we try to make sense of our lives, it only seems reasonable that if we're going to make good decisions, if we're going to come to conclusions about our experiences, about what we need, about how to live and move forward and how to cope with the challenging things that have happened in our life, then we should probably know more than less about who we are. We should probably integrate and appreciate and recognize the wholeness of who and what we are, and nothing less. In this respect, we can then look to what I consider to be a very simple model for understanding any human experience, and that is to look through the 4 dimensions of life: mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual. Very simple. We can divide every aspect of life, I would argue, into this kind of lens or this kind of framework. So there's a mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual quality or dimension or characteristic, I would suggest, to just about everything we can experience. So let's talk about multidimensional living in this regard. Mentally, when we talk about multidimensional living, what we're suggesting is that the mind is more than just our thoughts and attitudes, and it's more than just our accumulated factual knowledge. When we embrace multidimensional living, we embrace the idea that the mind can know things that it hasn't previously known or even known about. The mind can know things without acquiring intellectual knowledge or information. The mind can know things at a distance and beyond the realm of time and space. Well, that is pretty significant to incorporate into your experience of life and self, if that is in fact true, and thousands of years of human history, social science, and I would argue even contemporary science and psychology suggest this is absolutely true. So, do we limit the way we live every day as though our thoughts were the whole story, or do we include our intuition? Do we include our dreams? Do we include things that we feel we know, but we can't explain that we know? This is important, and this is why we must consider the multidimensional mind. Now let's talk about the emotional system. For a lot of us, the emotional system has always felt very personal, very intimate, and yet most of us have had moments in life, and I would argue particularly in the last years since 2020, where we have questioned whether our emotional world is as self-contained as we think. Is it in fact possible for us to feel other people's feelings? Is it in fact possible for us to feel what someone is saying, despite the fact that they may be trying to lead us to believe something different? Is it possible that the emotion of a group, or for that matter, a culture, can influence us? And there's been tremendous research, and certainly what people call anecdotal experience, to tell us that intergenerational trauma is real, that collective emotion is real, and that sometimes we can wake up with a feeling of dread or sadness, fear or anxiety that may simply not be all our own. In fact, if you look at the history of mysticism and the writings of the world's great mystics, we find that many of them felt plagued by the lack of boundaries they felt emotionally between themselves and other beings. In some moments, it's a tremendous gift because we feel unity, we feel oneness, we feel connection, and in other moments, it feels like a great, great pain to bear the emotional world of others, or even more than just one or, a small group, but perhaps even the planet, or again, an intergenerational chain of emotional experiences. Now we move on to the physical realm. In the physical realm, to be multidimensional means that our bodies are more than what we see, more than what we can measure. And to better understand our bodies, we need to incorporate a sense of subtle energy. We need to recognize that our bodies can be vehicles of knowing, that our bodies can be a kind of receptor for knowledge, for emotion, and really for the other two things that we've been talking about, that knowing and feeling can come through the body and not just through the intellect or the pure emotional experience. And we know already that our thoughts and feelings register in our body, but now we might consider that other people's thoughts or feelings register in our body. I think about when I spent some time in the Amazon, and the traditional healers there told me how if they wanted to understand a plant, yes, they learned the knowledge that was passed on. Yes, they tasted the medicine and tried it themselves, all physical sciences, but they would also spend sometimes as much as a week or more with that particular plant. They would sleep with it, eat only it, dream with it, and they would come to know the plant and its depths through the subtler senses. So we can know the physical world and the physical self more fully with a multidimensional awareness or approach. Ultimately, your vehicle for really getting into this is going to be energy, the belief in, the understanding of, the openness to the body as an expression of energy, the body as receptive to energy. Finally, we come to the spiritual dimension of multidimensional living, and this takes us back to some things we've talked about in some other videos, and that is the idea that this life is not confined to this world. And that would mean that we are souls, and more than the fact that we are souls, but we are multidimensional souls, that an aspect of us is quite literally the original source energy, that an aspect of us is unity consciousness, separate from original source energy because it is self-aware of interconnection. An aspect of us is a cosmic being, a being of subtle energy and light that can itself travel between dimensions. An aspect of us ourselves contains, you might say, the memory of karma, or the recording of past learning. A part of us carries gifts and lessons from one life to the next. So then we have a soul that travels between lives and a soul that lives in this life only. As we walk through these different dimensions, we realize that we are more than what we think, we are more than what we've been told, And this is a powerful place to live from, and I hope you'll explore it today.